The cop looked at the stack of moving boxes in the back of my truck, then back at me. "Sir," he said, "we got a call about trespassing on private HOA land. Are you aware this area is managed by the Lakeshore Crest Homeowners Association?" I let out a short laugh. "I built this cabin myself. On land I own. Got the deed in my glove box, want me to grab it?" He hesitated, clearly realizing something was off. That's when she strutted up, arms crossed like a mall cop with a badge. Wendy Norridge. Mid-50s. Short blonde bob, mirrored sunglasses, and that unmistakable air of someone who thinks the world owes her a thank you card just for existing. President of the Lakeshore Crest HOA and apparently self-appointed Lakefront sheriff. "No need," she snapped. "This property falls under our jurisdiction." He didn't clear this move in with the board. And this cabin, this eyesore, wasn't approved by architectural review. I turned toward her. "You're out of your mind. This land is outside your HOA, always has been. I made sure before I bought it." Wendy's lip curled. "That's what people say when they're trying to skirt the rules. This lake has a standard. We're not letting some random loner drag it down." The officer stepped back, clearly uncomfortable. "Ma'am, unless you can show me where his property overlaps with HOA boundaries, I can't really." "Oh, I will, officer," she cut him off. "I'll pull the plats. I have access. He's not staying here until this is resolved." I stared at her. "You just called the cops on a guy moving into his own house." She didn't even blink. "We take community standards seriously." The cop gave me a nod and left. Probably didn't want to get dragged into whatever HOA mess Wendy was stirring up. I unloaded the rest of my boxes in silence, watching Wendy hover by her golf cart like she was guarding Buckingham Palace. I'd moved out here to get away from nonsense like this. After 20 years of city noise and condo boards, the idea of a lakeside cabin on unincorporated land seemed like paradise. No rules, no meetings, just peace and a dock to fish off. But Wendy wasn't about to let that happen. 2 days later, I found a laminated piece of paper nailed to a tree at the edge of my drive. "Cease all construction activity. HOA review pending." I walked it straight back to her front door and knocked. She opened it like she was expecting royalty. "Did you nail this to my tree?" I asked. "I did," she said proudly. "The board met last night. We've decided to initiate annexation proceedings. Your property is now under Lakeshore Crest HOA jurisdiction." I blinked. "You decided? That's not how it works." She leaned on the door frame. "It is when the community votes. We're protecting our values. That cabin of yours doesn't meet aesthetic standards. The dock's not regulation, and your gravel driveway, that's just embarrassing." I stared at her, heart pounding. "You're out of your depth, Wendy." She just smiled and shut the door. The next morning, I found a bright orange sticker on my mailbox. "Non-compliant structure. Fines accruing daily." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just some HOA busybody being annoying. This was a turf war, and Wendy Norridge had just picked the wrong guy to mess with. My name's Nalan Price, and I wasn't going anywhere. By noon the day after the sticker showed up, I had already filed a trespassing report with the county sheriff's office. The deputy at the desk raised an eyebrow when I handed over the photo of the notice on my tree, the laminated sheet, and the orange sticker on my mailbox. "You're saying the HOA vandalized your property?" he asked. "Call it what you want," I said. "She nailed that thing at least 10 feet inside my boundary line, and she's issuing citations like she runs a government office." He took the paperwork and started typing. "Wendy Norridge again." I looked up. "You know her." He gave a quiet chuckle and shook his head. "You're not the first to come in with complaints, but most people back down before it gets this far." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Back at the cabin, I was setting up trail cameras, camouflaged, motion activated, positioned at the tree line and pointing toward my driveway. I wasn't planning to catch deer. I wanted faces, license plates, and timestamps. If anyone came near my property again, I would know. That evening, I drove into town and pulled the county land survey records from the public office. Took me nearly an hour, but I found what I was looking for. the original subdivision map from 32 years ago. My parcel was clearly marked Lot 7A outside the shaded HOA perimeter. There was even a note stating, not subject to Lakeshore Crest Association covenants. I made 5 high-resolution copies, highlighted the clause, and tucked them into a folder. I wasn't going to argue with Wendy on her turf anymore. Next time she came sniffing around, I'd put the law in her face. I didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, I came home from the hardware store to find 3 people standing on my dock, clipboards in hand. The tallest one turned as I stepped out of the truck. "We're conducting a shoreline assessment," he said. "Standard HOA procedure." I didn't even answer. I just walked back to the truck, pulled the folder from the passenger seat, and marched straight toward them. "You're trespassing," I said, flipping open the survey. "This dock is on private land, not yours, not shared, not subject to your rules. If you don't leave in the next 60 seconds, I'll call the sheriff and file criminal charges." The woman in the group took a step back. The tall guy didn't move. "You think you can bully the board with paperwork?" I held up the document. "This isn't paperwork, it's a county-verified land record. You're standing on property that belongs only to me." He glanced over at the other 2, then down at the dock under his feet. "Wendy said this section was being redesignated." "She lied," I said. "And when the sheriff sees this, she's going to have a lot more to worry about than dock inspections." They left without another word. That night, I sent a certified letter to the HOA's registered office. It included the land survey, a formal cease and desist, and a notice that any further entry onto my property would be pursued criminally. I emailed a copy to the county zoning department 2-3 days passed. I didn't see Wendy, didn't hear a peep. Then Friday morning, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Deputy Langston with the county sheriff's office. I need to speak with you in person. It's about an incident at the lake." When I got there, Langston was waiting outside the station. He motioned me around the side of the building. "We've got a problem," he said, handing me a printed photo. It showed my dock specifically, the solar pump I'd installed for the boat lift ripped out and floating half submerged in the water. I clenched my jaw. "When?" "Last night." "We got a call from someone down the shore. Said they saw a group of people on your dock around 10, flashlights, toolboxes." "Did your guys catch them?" Langston hesitated. "We stopped a golf cart leaving the area, 3 occupants, one of them was Wendy. She told the deputy they were performing unauthorized structure removal under emergency HOA authority." I stared at him. "They admitted it. They claimed you were in violation of shoreline safety codes. The problem is, the county doesn't enforce those codes on your parcel. And the HOA has no jurisdiction there." My voice was low. "So what happens now?" Langston pulled out a second document. "We're opening an investigation into criminal mischief and property damage. If we can confirm who removed the pump and caused the damage, they'll be facing charges." The moment I got home, I checked the trail cams. Sure enough, there they were, Wendy and 2 others, clearly visible, tools in hand, yanking the pump loose and tossing parts into the lake like they were cleaning up trash. I sent the footage to Langston that afternoon. Within 24 hours, the sheriff's office issued citations to all 3 of them. Wendy's mug shot ended up on the county record site. Apparently, someone from town leaked it to a local Facebook group where it spread like wildfire. By the end of the week, I started hearing from other property owners. Quiet calls, emails. A guy named Marcus, who lived at the far end of the lake, told me Wendy had fined him $300 last year for painting his shutters non-complimentary blue. Another woman, Joyce, said she'd been threatened with lien proceedings over a bird feeder. "I thought I was the only one," she said. "I set up a meeting at the VFW hall. Invited the non-HOA homeowners plus anyone inside the HOA who felt fed up. 17 people showed up. Every single one had a story. Unauthorized fees, denied improvement requests, threats of foreclosure, even tampered ballots during board elections. That's when I realized this wasn't just about me. Wendy had built a miniature empire, and no one had challenged her until now. One guy, a retired municipal attorney named Ed, brought a binder of legal documents. He'd served on a city zoning review board for 20 years. "She's been bluffing her authority," he said. "But if we can prove the HOA overstepped its boundaries literally and legally, we might be able to dissolve parts of its control, maybe even force a full audit." So we formed a committee, not a rebellion, not a protest, a legal coalition. We called it CLEAR, Community Legal Enforcement Against Retaliation. Over the next 2 weeks, we gathered evidence. Joyce pulled HOA meeting minutes that showed Wendy had pushed through new shoreline rules without the required quorum. Marcus found a document that proved the HOA had collected over $50,000 in environmental maintenance fees that were never spent and never reported to the community. Ed drafted a formal complaint to the County Oversight Board. We filed it alongside a petition signed by over 60% of the residents both inside and outside the HOA. Our request was simple: strip Lakeshore Crest HOA of its lakefront management privileges and initiate a forensic audit of its finances. We didn't expect a response for months. It came in 5 days. The county board issued a temporary injunction. Effective immediately, the HOA was prohibited from enforcing any rules, collecting any fees, or initiating any actions concerning lakefront properties. A hearing was scheduled for 30 days later. The following morning, Wendy's prized golf cart was parked out front with a giant sign duct taped to it: "Lake Queen no more." She didn't come to the next HOA meeting, neither did her 2 co-conspirators, and when the hearing finally came, it wasn't just about my dock or their trespassing. It was about years of abuse, manipulation, and fabricated authority. The county board ruled decisively. The HOA's management of the lakefront was officially revoked. They were barred from collecting any further fees, and their past records were turned over to the state attorney's office for investigation. As for my cabin, I added a new sign to the tree by my driveway: "Private property. No trespassing." Not part of any HOA. Underneath, I added one more line: "Bring a clipboard and you better bring a lawyer." 3 weeks after the injunction, the lake was quieter than it had been in years. Without Wendy's patrols and clipboard squads, people started fishing off their docks again. Kids paddled around in kayaks without laminated violation notices being stuffed in their parents' mailboxes. One family even repaired their old boathouse, a structure Wendy had previously declared aesthetic pollution. But peace didn't last, not after the auditors arrived. 4 state investigators showed up in 2 unmarked sedans, slipping through the community in polo shirts and sunglasses. They spent the first day collecting HOA financial records from the office at the clubhouse, a building most of us had never even been allowed inside. By the second day, they were knocking on doors. One of them, a woman named Marisol, came by my cabin with a clipboard and a calm, focused look. "We're following up on the complaint your group submitted," she said. "We're particularly interested in the Environmental Maintenance Fund. Can you confirm whether any improvements were made to shared infrastructure using those funds in the last 5 years?" "They haven't touched a thing," I said. "The only thing they maintained was power." Marisol scribbled something. "Power? They used those funds to keep electricity running in the clubhouse, but no one had access except board members. The rest of us weren't allowed to rent it, use the dock, or even sit on the benches out front." She paused. "And you're certain of that? You can ask anyone on this side of the lake. Most of us didn't even know where the funds were going until this year." Marisol nodded once, thanked me, and walked back to her car. That was the last time I saw her, but the fallout came fast. 3 days later, an unmarked box truck rolled up to the HOA office. 2 men in matching khakis and plain jackets walked inside, and within minutes they were carrying out boxes of paper files and hard drives. Wendy wasn't there. She'd been conspicuously absent since the hearing. Her house sat dark most nights, the golf cart parked in the garage with a flat rear tire. Her name was still on the HOA's website, but neighbors whispered that she hadn't returned any emails or calls for over a week. Then, on a rainy Thursday morning, something changed. I woke up to the sound of tires grinding into gravel. A black SUV sat idling at the end of my driveway. A man in a dark suit stepped out and popped open an umbrella. I met him halfway down the drive, boots crunching in the mud. "Nolan Price?" he asked. "That's right." He extended a card. Assistant District Attorney Caleb Marin. "We've got a warrant to execute on a private residence inside Lakeshore Crest. I understand you've been involved in the ongoing investigation." I nodded, confused. "You're going after Wendy," he glanced toward the road. "We believe there's more here than financial misconduct. Someone in the HOA administration submitted forged environmental reports to the county. We're looking at potential fraud exceeding $200,000. My stomach dropped. "You're saying she faked environmental reports?" "Not just her," Marin said, "but she signed them, and that makes her accountable." That afternoon, half the neighborhood lined the sidewalk as county investigators and 2 uniformed deputies searched Wendy's home. They emerged with a locked file cabinet, a laptop, and several folders marked private. One of the deputies taped a seizure notice to the door. By sunset, the rumor mill was in full swing. Someone claimed Wendy had paid her nephew, who wasn't even a licensed contractor, to write a phony erosion report and submit it under a fabricated business name. Another neighbor said the HOA had used that report to justify levying a one-time emergency environmental assessment on residents, pulling in nearly $90,000 in one summer. The next morning, the sheriff's department issued a public statement. Wendy Norridge was under criminal investigation for fraud, falsification of government documents, and misuse of community funds. But it got worse, because the audit turned up something no one expected: a private account. According to the investigators, over the past 4 years, the HOA had funneled maintenance fees into an off-the-books fund. That fund had been used to pay for consulting services, legal defense retainers, and security patrols, yet no invoices matched those expenses, the name on the account. Wendy's husband, Peter Norridge, he hadn't even lived in the state for 2 years. By the end of the week, the state attorney filed charges. Wendy was arrested at a gas station 30 miles away trying to board a bus headed west. Her mugshot hit the news that night. The photo showed her in a wrinkled raincoat, eyes wide and unfocused, no sunglasses, no clipboard, just a woman realizing the empire she'd built was crumbling beneath her. The next HOA meeting was held in silence. No one sat at the board table. No one took minutes. A few of the remaining members quietly resigned by email that night. Meanwhile, the county announced a full dissolution of Lakeshore Crest's HOA charter. The community would revert to county management, and any future attempts to form a governance body would require a 2/3 public vote and outside legal oversight. It was over. But the scars were still there. Marcus ended up selling his house after all. Not out of fear, but relief. "Too many years trying to keep my head down," he told me. "I want to live somewhere I don't have to measure my lawn height with a ruler." Others stayed. Joyce started organizing neighborhood cookouts, no dues, no dress code, just people bringing food and folding chairs. Families began using the lake again without fear of being fined for unregistered flotation devices. As for me, I finally got to sit on my dock in peace. I fixed the pump, reinforced the platform, and added a small bench overlooking the water. One evening, as the sun slid low and the trees turned gold, a voice called out from the shoreline down the way. It was Ed, the retired attorney. He walked over with a manila envelope under one arm. "I thought you'd want to see this," he said, handing it to me. Inside was a letter from the state attorney's office, addressed to our coalition. It confirmed that, thanks to the submitted evidence and community cooperation, Wendy Norridge had agreed to a plea deal. She would forfeit all claims to HOA authority, repay misused funds, and accept a 5-year ban from holding any community governance position in the state. She still might do jail time, Ed said. Depends on what they decide about the forged documents, I nodded. She'll never touch this lake again, that's enough for me. Ed smiled faintly. You know, I've lived here for 18 years. Never thought I'd see it change. I looked out at the water where a group of kids were laughing, splashing off a homemade raft. It didn't change, I said. We just took it back. He left a moment later, and I sat alone in the silence that followed. No patrol carts, no laminated threats. No phony jurisdiction, just the sound of the lake and the wind in the trees. And for the first time since I'd moved in, it felt like home. The letter from the state attorney's office might have closed the legal case, but it cracked open something deeper in the community: curiosity, suspicion, and a hunger to know just how far Wendy's reach had gone. People started digging, not for revenge, but for clarity. Years of silence had left too many questions unanswered. I didn't expect to be pulled back in. I figured I'd done my part, and now it was time to let the dust settle. But then a teenager named Tyler knocked on my door one Saturday morning with a drawstring gym bag and a guarded look on his face. My dad worked for the HOA, he said. He cleaned the clubhouse and did maintenance stuff. After the audit, he quit, but this was in the attic. I don't know what it is, but he said you'd know what to do with it. Inside the bag were 5 old mini DV tapes, dated between years. Each one had a label: Security Cam Lot Dispute, Doc Confrontation, Board Private, and 2 with only dates. It took me the better part of an afternoon to get my old camcorder working with a converter, but once the first tape started playing, my stomach turned. The footage showed Wendy in a private meeting with 2 board members, both of whom had resigned after the audit. They were discussing a plan to deliberately misfile property boundaries for lakefront lots, shifting responsibility for maintenance costs onto non-board homeowners. One of them even laughed about how nobody ever checks the old plats anyway. The second tape was worse. It showed 2 men faces partially obscured by hooded sweatshirts removing survey markers in the middle of the night. One of them wore a jacket with the HOA's logo stitched on the back. I didn't keep watching. I called Deputy Langston. By Monday, the tapes were in the hands of the county prosecutor. Tyler's father, once reluctant to speak, gave a sworn affidavit confirming the tapes had been stored in a padlocked cabinet in the clubhouse's attic, accessible only to board members. Within 48 hours, a grand jury was convened. The county charged 2 former board members with criminal conspiracy to manipulate property records. The evidence on the tapes was damning: intentional tampering, fraud, and falsification of public documents. Wendy had already signed her plea deal, but now her name was being added to a new investigation, one far more serious than financial misconduct. This wasn't just about an overreaching HOA anymore. They had actively altered boundary markers on private land, which meant they'd tampered with legal property lines, a felony under state law. The county clerk's office launched a full resurvey of all lots bordering the lake. The results were staggering. At least 6 property owners, including Ed, had unknowingly paid thousands over the years for land maintenance that wasn't even their responsibility. 3 others had been misled into giving up slivers of shoreline that legally belonged to them. Joyce, who had always kept her records neatly boxed in her garage, handed over a signed letter from 5 years ago, an agreement drafted by Wendy, and stamped with the HOA seal, pressuring her into moving her fence back to conform with community shoreline alignment. The survey proved her original placement was correct. The prosecutor's office contacted every homeowner affected. Those who had suffered financial loss were added to a civil restitution lawsuit. A judge ordered an immediate freeze on the personal assets of the 2 former board members and approved a lien on Wendy's property to cover future claims. It wasn't overkill, it was overdue. Meanwhile, the Lakeshore Crest HOA charter, already gutted by the county's earlier ruling, was officially dissolved by court order. Not suspended, not restructured, dissolved, the nonprofit entity ceased to exist. Its bank accounts were closed, and any remaining funds were placed in a community trust managed by the county, until a new, democratically elected neighborhood council could be established. No one rushed to volunteer for that. The old clubhouse, stripped of its former authority, was turned over to the county parks department. They opened it to the public for the first time in years. Within a week, a group of local teens had painted over the faded beige walls with a mural of rolling hills, cattails, and a giant blue heron stretching its wings across the lake. It was the first time I'd seen that building reflect anything remotely human. As for Wendy, her plea deal didn't protect her from the new charges. She was rearrested, this time on felony counts. Her attempt to withdraw her plea fell flat. The judge refused to accept it, citing her prior admissions and the mountain of new evidence. She was sentenced to 18 months in county detention, with 5 years of supervised release and a permanent ban from serving on any housing authority, board, or property management organization within the state. The morning her sentencing was announced, someone placed a single folding chair at the end of the dock near the old clubhouse. Taped to the backrest was a laminated copy of the county's dissolution order. Nobody claimed credit. Nobody needed to. Over the weeks that followed, the lakefront transformed. Residents started reclaiming their spaces not with fences or gates, but with picnic tables, kayaks, and open porch lights. One family set up a floating movie screen and invited neighbors to bring rafts and watch old comedies on warm Friday nights. People who'd lived next to each other for years without exchanging more than a nod now shared stories, tools, even meals. I finally met the man who lived 2 cabins down Ben, a former Coast Guard mechanic who fixed up old outboards in his spare time. He helped me tune up my fishing boat, and I helped him build a covered rack for his canoes. Neither of us talked much the first few days. We didn't need to. One evening, as we sat on the dock with a couple of thermoses, Ben looked out at the water and said, "I never thought this place could breathe again." I nodded. It just needed to exhale. The cabin, once a target, had become something else entirely. Neighbors dropped by with pie, borrowed tools, or just stories. Nobody asked for permission. Nobody gave orders. Late in the summer, the county held a community celebration at the newly opened clubhouse. No speeches, no agendas. Just a long table of potluck dishes and a local bluegrass band playing under string lights. I walked past the bulletin board on my way in. The old HOA logo had been replaced with a hand-painted sign that read, "This is your lake. You don't need a permit to enjoy it." I didn't stay late. Back at my cabin, the frogs had started their chorus, and the wind carried the faint sound of laughter across the water. I sat on the bench I'd built, the same one they'd once tried to remove, and let the quiet settle around me. No more laminated threats. No more fake authority. Just the lake, the trees, and the faint glow of porch lights dotting the shoreline like fireflies. It wasn't perfect. It didn't need to be. It was finally ours.